Hey there everybody, this is Andre the Game Idea Guy, and I'm going to be talking about Nintendo Vision, which is a concept that a longtime follower, Erick-ADub, on Twitter came up with. He's done some sketches of the concept, gave a general idea. I'm going to go ahead and talk about it, give my thoughts on it, maybe some things that could be tweaked, as well as potentially, if I can fathom it, how social media would respond to this device. So I'm going to go over it. That's the first part. I'm going to give my opinions and some potential tweaks that I think would work for it that would really drive the concept home. And then I'm going to give what I think social media and basically gaming press would say about something like this. So overall, this is a 3-part package for you guys. And I'll say personally right off the bat, this is a very interesting concept to me. I probably wouldn't even have wanted to discuss it if it wasn't. But Eric has always come up with some really interesting stuff, especially if you check through the stuff that he's posted to social media. He always comes up with some interesting stuff, so just giving everybody that up front. Now, I did think about making a joke saying, oh hey, I came up with this concept early in January and then dispelling the joke, but then I thought that wouldn't have landed well, mostly because I'm not like that anyway. But I also don't want somebody's first impression of me being, oh, I'm going to steal this idea and claim it as mine. Yeah, it started out in my head good, then I was like, yeah, the repercussions of that aren't going to be all that great. So, and I don't even know why I felt the need to say anything. Maybe I'm just trying to drive up time. Maybe. But, okay, getting into this. The post came from January 11th of this year, 2024. And I was directly added to make sure I saw it. So I think I saw that later that day. I think that, yeah, it was in the afternoon, so I saw it later that day. I'm pretty sure I was at work when it was originally posted. But just this morning, this is Eric talking, not me. Just this morning, I had this crazy, wonderful dream of Nintendo announcing a new console to follow the Switch. To reiterate, this is not a Switch 2/Pro. Introducing the Nintendo Vision. The controller itself is the console, and it has a projector, an eye, that displays the game anywhere. It is compatible with Joy-Cons and backwards compatible with Switch games. To project your console, press the eye on the controller. Any surface can be a screen. You always have the option of playing on television with the Bluetooth HDMI plug-in or a With the Bluetooth HDMI plug-in for flat screen TVs, you can connect the Nintendo Vision to a bigger screen for a bigger screen experience. So first thing, and I said this on Twitter when I commented back and forth with him, it wouldn't be a Bluetooth HDMI because Bluetooth doesn't have the bandwidth to handle it doesn't have the bandwidth to handle you showing pictures and things. It would only be useful for transferring sound or like doing like an internet connection. It's not good for video. So it would have to be some form of Wi-Fi HDMI wireless connection, but that is something that already exists. So it's not like that's a whole undoable concept. It's just it couldn't be Bluetooth. I wanted to make sure I said that now because I know there's going to be someone who hears that's technologically minded and be like, oh no, Bluetooth can't do that. I said that in the as we were tweeting. Another option is downloading a companion app on your smartphone and hook it up to the controller. Other features include downloading updates, voice chat, etc. Then he said he put down thoughts, and then followed up another thing to note: the dimensions of the screen when the vision is projected is equivalent to that of the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode. So I'm going to guess he means like it's going to be a 16:9 ratio, which is what Nintendo's screen ratio is for the Switch when it's in handheld. Because that would make sense, and that's how the majority of games are displayed right now. They are in 16:9 format. On PC, you can stretch them to 21:9 depending on how wide your screen is and such. But again, that's not like a huge detail, but it is something of relevance that he wanted to mention. So I went ahead and made sure to put that in there. So I like the idea. Conceptually, it's interesting because it's not something anyone else has done, and it would open up a world of opportunities for other things for gaming. One of them, namely, being augmented reality. Because something like this would be a boon for augmented reality if you're going to have it displaying on other things, which would then turn anything that you display it to into a touchscreen potentially. Now, there are a couple issues with this. One, signal disruption. If somebody walks through where it is being displayed, where it's being projected to, and you're in the middle of a game, it could, one, throw off your perception of what you're doing, as I mentioned in the tweets. And it could also not, depending on surface, it could be very hard to see it. So you'd have to be very selective about what your surface is going to be. And one thing I didn't also take into account is if it is projecting from your hands and the controller and you get excited to move about, you're going to be moving your screen a lot. That was something I didn't think of. But even with that, I think... But then there's also thinking about multiplayer and how it would work for that. Like having, especially if they're using similar technology to what the Switch does now, where you can just have them each connected to each other locally the same way, and you're projecting your screens all together. That could work. That could be a nice way to get things done. Now, again, it really comes down to how well it's developed. And in someone's hand, a lot of this would be very, what's the word I'm looking for? It'd be very compact, which would mean it's probably going to be more expensive to have it be that way. Also, you have to think about ventilation and heat dispersion from the parts inside of it, potentially radiating heat. So this isn't going to be a small controller. At the very least, it's probably going to be about the size of the Duke Xbox controller. If anybody remembers that. It's probably going to be about as big as that at bare minimum. That's how big it's going to have to be in order for all of this stuff to work. Not saying it can't be done. If that would just be the size of the form factor, it would have to be on top of everything being inside of it. Now, if I could, I would suggest a slightly different way to do this. Slightly, just slightly. Now, they could have a console that is very similar to the Switch, physically speaking, but have a dock that has a projector built into it. That would mitigate some of the problems with it being in your hand and having to switch stuff around. And on top of that, the more tablet form factor would give a lot more space and room for the parts inside to breathe, and it wouldn't have to be as compact, which would mean that the cost could be a little bit lower than having it all inside of a controller. I mean, it's essentially almost the same, but it's not quite stuck to the same form factor. And again, the Switch form factor has been proven to be able to be done. this way. And on top of that, it doesn't take away from the concept. You still have that concept where you don't necessarily need a television screen. And then when you take that out of the dock, you have its own proprietary screen to itself. So more or less, I would say that the Nintendo Vision itself would be an enhanced version of the dock that has its own hardware inside of it that you could plug a device very similar to the Switch into. So you'd have both parts be able to do processing, but when you need, like, you know, higher quality images and stuff like that, you put it in the dock, and then that would create what you need. And then you could use the dock again. The dock itself could have a projector inside of it to display the image wherever you feel like pointing it, and that would mitigate a lot of the shaking around and stuff. And on top of that, that would mean you don't need a television at all. But you could wholeheartedly play this machine without a television. All you would potentially need is a bare wall or a decent sized white screen to project it to. Plus, I was thinking about it, and all this stuff as a form factor inside a controller is going to kill the battery really quickly. It will kill the battery very, very fast. And that's with considering that, you know, okay, you're going to be swapping off Joy-Con pieces and stuff like that. So you're also going to have to make it versatile enough that when you swap off those pieces, you can put on third-party pieces that are attaching Joy-Con slots, like a lot of people do, because they have different third-party controller pieces have form factors to help you better grip the Switch. So I would think that concept would also have to be considered, because it could be very hard to have something like this without that thought in mind. But also thinking, if we're going to make that part of the thing, I was thinking about it, if we're also going to make sure that we have the controller able to project, then there should be a form factor for it to project while stationary. So maybe you don't necessarily have to have a dock. You could just have the controller work in a way that you can put it, not the controller, but the base of the controller. I'd say have two parts to the controller. Have the controller work itself. If we're going to avoid the tablet design, have like a slate that everything is in that's of similar size to what the Switch by itself is outside of the dock, and have that slate have a thing that it could fit into that kind of mimics being a controller. Again, that with concern for third-party Joy-Con pieces to be able to be slapped in. So that way you can still do everything and have it be portable, have it be a portable projector. No, I think the dock actually makes more sense. But if you're trying to, you know, not have to have it have a screen, which could cut down the cost. I'm trying to think of ways you could do this without bloating the cost up, because if you bloat the cost up, Nintendo's more than likely not going to do it. So we got to think about it in a way that they would do it. So potentially a slate without the screen that's sort of like similar size to the Switch, or like the Duke controller. A slate that's about the same size as the Duke controller for Xbox could actually do this, where it would have the projector eye that points out the back of it, and you would be able to use it while moving around, which would probably work for the AR games. But if you needed to be stationary for, like, you know, like a normal sit down couch co-op type of game, then you would put it down and then it would have a stand that it stands on while it projects. That would cut out the necessary need for a potential dock, and you could keep all of the parts inside of it. So I'm giving you a couple different form factors it could take. Now, Nintendo, we know their sweet spot is around 300, 350. Potentially, I think they could drag to 400 if depending on how good the technology is inside of everything that they're using. And then you got to think about what the storage is, capacity, and stuff like that. We're not even talking about those things, but that's something to be considered as part of what the cost would be. But if we're going with the idea of it having the built-in projector, it's probably going to run about $350 at launch. All things considered, especially if it's still going to be using the same cartridge format like the Switch does, which would make sense because it still has to be portable. You still have to be able to move around with it. But if it is portable and you can start making games that use augmented reality or projecting the screen onto surfaces and using those surfaces as touchscreens, that would do a lot. It's not like the technology doesn't exist, because there are smartwatches that do this very same thing, where it projects onto your skin and you can use your skin as the touchscreen. So it's not like it's a wholly impossible concept or a foreign concept or idea. The technology exists. Only thing that we have to worry about is cost. And we're gonna try to get that sweet spot. So that's why I'm thinking of so many different form factors. So if it sounds a little incoherent, I do apologize for that. I do think, though, that the slate idea that I was just talking about actually would be a happy medium bridging thing, where you could connect it to that piece, but it still has the form factor of a controller, and you can carry it around, project the screen, make it a touch screen and everything like that on top of whatever surface you're projecting it to. And then from there, utilize it again for augmented reality games, because Nintendo probably would be able to make a decent amount of them. And it's not like they haven't worked in that sphere before. 3DS, for example. So we go with that and try to make $350 the price point. That could, and I think could potentially leave it the most room for people to find it and it'd be popular, especially if it's the new big thing. We're showing off augmented reality in a more focused format. And then, it can still play traditionally styled games, and you can still hook it up to a TV and all of that stuff. And now, obviously, all of these things would have to come in the box, because you know how Nintendo is. They're going to make most of this stuff come in the box. They're not going to do a whole lot of other stuff that's going to cause issues for the player in the long run, as far as getting set up. So, with that in mind, you'd still be able to play stuff like Mario Kart Home, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Smash Ultimate. You can still play Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Snipper Clips. I'm just naming random games. ARMS. You can still play all of those games with this device, and then whatever new games they come up with. And on top of that, you can play it without having to hook it up to a television, without having a dedicated physical screen to it. Alright, so I think that's a decent, that one, the slate idea, is probably the most workable idea. That or the re-envisioned Switch format. Because having it just be the controller itself and not be a detachable part could cause some issues along the way. But again, with all of that considered, how would social media and gaming press react? How would social media and gaming press react? First thing that I know gaming press would say, well, it's just the Switch 2.0. It's the same type of machine, but it doesn't have the usual bells and whistles that we are expecting it to have, and now we are upset and this machine is going to fail. And people on social media will echo that for the most part, except for people who are like me that actually take the time to think about the concept and sit down and be like, no, I see where this can work. Now, that means that we're going to have a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, which is typical of any new console launch, obviously. But if it were in the hands of people and people were showing it off on social media, say they could post from the machine, or they can post videos of themselves playing with the machine. Like, say, for instance, Nintendo drops this and it has a piano app. Like, just for the shits and giggles of it. It has a piano app and you can put your controller down on the little slate piece, and you can angle it down on the table, and now you have a piano that you can play on your table because the sound will play from the machine. Little quirky stuff like that, showing it off and then showing off how games look and how they run and play on it, would potentially swing the scope of social media influence back in a positive direction, especially because people would look at it and play it and be like, oh, this is cool. And then you would find that there are people potentially, let's say this goes like viral in the way that the Wii did, where a lot of people wanted it for the versatility of the different things it can do and that it is presented to do. That would be where I think that this would be able to take off, and that would swing most social interaction about it in a positive direction. Obviously, you're going to have the obvious naysayers, well, it's not powerful enough, and I don't care about gimmick this, gimmick that. Screw those opinions, because that's what happened with the Switch. People are still talking about the Switch the same way, even though a lot of games are released for it. I think it's over 4,000 something on the eShop right now for you to be able to purchase. So that's an irrelevant thing to worry about. What you would want to worry about from this, and I would expect what happen with social media, is there's going to be a big bluster, like I said. It's going to start out negative, swing back positive, and then fall somewhere in the middle with a bunch of people who don't care about the social media presence for it, going ahead, picking it up, playing around with it once they see a couple different videos online of people actually using it. And that would be the thing I think would work well for it, and that would probably be the way that it becomes a viable product. So, I went over that. If anybody else wants to add their opinions in, talk about it, anything that you think of that I might not have thought of, feel free to. I'm pretty sure Eric wouldn't mind hearing what other people think about it. So I'm just, again, putting that out there. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for listening. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games. Peace out, everybody.